Hello, hello.
Nice t-shirt,
Hey, Jace. Look at you two boys. Look
man.
like little brothers in arms, man. Big
Yeah,
little buddies. Hey,
I can
Jace,
hear you.
welcome.
Hey, how you doing? I can hear both of you very good.
Oh,
Okay,
cool.
cool. So
Awesome.
my internet's a bit dodgy today, so I'm just in and out. If I pause like this, don't move, just ignore me, carry on with the show, and it will jump back in. Um, so Jace, welcome back, man. Nice to have a chat with you again.
Oh yeah, it's been a while. I've had my ups and downs since then.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yes, of course. Same, same. So, just to like give you a sort of a brief overview of where we're coming at so far is we're on the dream, sleep, elf, and dwarf tangent.
Okay. Oh, you're in the European Nordic
We are.
faiths.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're sort of like looking along the lines of we started asking the question, what is sleep? What are dreams? Why do we do it? Is it natural? Can we evidence it through history? Like, is this something that's recent or is it reoccurring? How organic is it to us? And then that tangent got us onto the topic of, well, looking at dreams throughout history, like what culture has sort of like connected to dreams. And like we started with elves came up really powerfully, and then that degraded down to dwarfs, so that the concept of black elves ended up being actually the word actually means dwarf. And so then we looked
Okay.
at dwarfs, and then the dwarfs, strangely enough, create this thing called mead, which puts people to sleep. And that's where we get
Hmm.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and where we get this like Rip Van Winkle, the story Rip Van Winkle. And then we looked at sort of like kept going down that tangent, and then we found this massive body of work through the historical mythology talking about dwarfs actually being the reason for nightmares, and that dwarfs had this thing where they would like sit on your chest, and then when you sleep they will actually integrate into your dreams, and this was their control method. And it was all about dreams and sleep and dwarfs.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's
That's
where we're
all.
at.
So how many shows did it take to get through all that?
Well, we just sort of we basically went on this tangent of like the question we asked was like, if we
Uh
were to look at everything we know so far, like what is the thing that we would never think to look at, basically?
huh.
And that was dwarfs.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I mean, I'm familiar with the term nightmare. I know where it comes from. I know a lot of people are under the misconception that nightmare comes from dreams chasing you. They associate the female evil horse in your dreams.
Yes.
That's a very late interpretation. The
Mm.
original interpretation is very similar to what you said. It was a very short stature demonic like woman that sat on your chest
Mm-hmm.
and caused sleep paralysis.
Yes.
I believe it was a Scandinavian or Nordic
Yes.
faith. But and the nightmares actually gave rise to a whole field of tradition about the hags. The hags would visit you in your sleep, or when you were
Yes.
sometimes in the daytime in a forest. A hag would show up in somebody's storyline only when they've been fighting sleep for so long because they've been trying to make it home. They've been journeying. They don't want to go to sleep until they make it safely home, and the hags will appear in the forest. I've read
Yes.
those stories too. Yeah, it's long before I ever made my Phoenix discoveries, long before I ever did my Chronicon. Yeah, comparative mythology was my thing. I really liked
Yeah.
getting into that.
Awesome. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to an amazing podcast. We've got Jason from Archaix here to join us to have a very lofty, unusual conversation that I think is going to be fascinating for everyone. So, Jason, welcome back to the show, buddy.
Man, I love being with Autodidactic and you. We always have fun. Oh, we always have a good time. It's not a back's not against the wall trying to answer so many deep questions. You know what I mean? Right here, just
No, it's all fun and relaxed here. And of course, big thank you to Melissa for our matching t-shirts.
I know the little brothers in arms here. Little twin souls, like on the other side of the realm.
There you go. You're gonna get the Twinkies started. There you go.
So Jace, like I just gave you a quick sort of summary of where we're at, but like I've got so many questions for you, and Cambell and I've been working on, you know, some really like fun new ideas, I guess, to add to the conversation around this, you know, body of work. And I guess Cambell, you're right, just to jump on into where we're at.
Yeah, we're sort of going down the dark elves, light elves, dwarves, what is sleep. We've discovered that the dwarves are linked with mead and beer, which is, you know, like a basic sleeping potions, and then they're linked to dreams and nightmares and all this stuff that we've come across. So yeah, we thought we'd pick your brain, Jace, and see what you can sort of fill in about the dream time, and also you know, you talked a lot about the vapor canopy and the possibility there was no night, right, and that the moon's been brought in.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that doesn't mean there wasn't any sleep. They slept back then too. As a matter of fact, sleep really takes up about 33% of our entire existence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even though as an adult, you only require 6, maybe 7 hours sleep. Some people get by with 5. It still doesn't take away from that percentage, because when you were a child, you slept way more than you do as an adult. So by the time you're 12 or 13 years old, 50% of your life was in sleep, you know, taking naps and always sleeping in, and especially in your youth, all the way to 6 or 7 years old, you slept most of your life as you were growing. So sleep is a really good topic. It's probably a topic that's probably the most ignored aspect of human existence, because if 33% of your life is doing something other than what you're consciously remembering, then yeah, I would think that we need to get to the bottom of what's really happening. What kind of dynamic? Where is this? Because in my personal worldview, when you're awake, like right now, we are exchanging information with the oversoul. We're exchanging information with the construct, and we're building tomorrow. We're building the next few hours. We're doing that. But what the hell are we doing when we sleep?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and the fact that you mentioned the vapor canopy, that I mean, I wasn't expecting you to mention the vapor canopy in conjunction with a video on sleep, but since you did, I can pull one right out of my head, because in my years of comparative mythology, Native American tradition stunned me. I could not believe the wealth of information we get from North and Central American traditions. And have you ever heard of a tribe called I believe it's pronounced like Ojibwe? I'm not really sure, but Lake Superior in North America is where they were generally located. But they have a rich tradition in the northern United States. These different Indian families, man, they believed. You have to. Sorry about that engine. I got so beautiful today. I got all my doors open. All my doors all the way outside the building are open. But yeah, they believed that the entire, you know, the world was Turtle Island. The whole world was built on his turtle's back. And according to their belief system, Spider Woman, the spider goddess, it was a matriarchal system back then. They lived under the dark purple light. And I can't pronounce what they really called her. It's pronounced, it's called Spider Woman, but I know it's Asibikashi or something. But, you know, I'm just a good old boy. I'm a good old Texas boy. I'm not going to be able to pronounce all that stuff. But it's a Spider Woman. She watched over these people, and she built their lodges. And what's really interesting is she built a web over the sky to trap the dew. All right. Yeah. Spider to save her people. She built this web over the sky, and it trapped the dew. And the only way the people could enjoy the under the dark purple light that they could enjoy the sunlight was the small pieces of dew, trapped pieces of the sunlight. So they lived in a dark world. It was the canopy world, but they knew of a sun, but it had been hidden from them by a protective web that was spun by a spider grandmother over the sky. And what's interesting is that these same people, they had two belief systems. One of them was about dream catchers, and they believed that this web over the sky, this is the origin of the dream catcher. There were evil things that were trying to get in, and spider grandmother's web would catch them, and as long and keep them from coming to the ground and messing with her children, humans. So it became a tradition to make small dream catchers. You've all seen the little nettings and dream catchers, yeah. And the only time you have to worry about these beings is when it's dark, aka when it's sleep. During the dark purple light period, the vapor canopy period, the web was over the whole sky, so everybody was protected. But since that's no longer the case, the only time it gets dark now is when the moon comes out. So you got to sleep under a dream catcher. That's the only way you'll keep those bad entities from entering you while you're unprotected and while you're asleep. But these old traditions, man, they're Native American. There's so many different rich variants, and I'm surprised you mentioned the vapor canopy because the association to sleep and the dream catcher isn't an obvious one at all. It's not.
No, that's a good one. I didn't know that either. That's really, really cool.
So, like, Jace, would you set up you would definitely evidence that sleep has been something we've done throughout history. Like, this is and dream and sleep have been evidenced throughout history for like way past this last reset. Yeah.
Yeah. There's never been a time when we didn't sleep. There's never been a time when we didn't sleep. The Avatar requires a reboot. Yeah. Now, physically, I believe that there has been a biosphere in the past that the Avatar itself didn't really require anything but a small downtime, maybe a nap or something. Under the vapor canopy, it probably wasn't necessary with enriched oxygen, atmospheric pressure, the vitamin and mineral content that we had, the ambient radiation in the dark purple light period. I believe the Avatar was fine. The problem is the psyche. The psyche has to have a reboot. And now I do have some theoretical material in many of my presentations, what I believe sleep to be. I believe that sleep, you are being jacked back into the construct. And the construct is basically plotting all the next reality tunnels that are available to you on the next awake period. Now it's the illusion of freedom. These are all the variables that you could go on the next day. You could surprise it by breaking pattern, which and then when you do that, you catch AIX off guard, and now all of a sudden weird things happen like Mandela effect and coincidence and synchronicity and deja vu. But most people don't experience those things normally. That's only 2 or 3 times in a lifetime you experience that, because most of the time the construct it does anticipate precisely what you're going to be doing. It extrapolates greatly. So I think sleep is when the psyche powers down and the simulation basically takes over and starts mapping what your next moves are. Not knowing what they are, it's just making projections to compare. Because it has a lot of variables in case you go in a certain direction. It's got to prepare for that. But that's just my interpretation of what I think is happening when we go to sleep, because it's the only time that the central nervous system powers down. The central nervous system is what you see, you hear, you taste, you touch, you smell. These senses are what imprison us. But when we're asleep, we're free of that imprisonment. When we're asleep, we have now divorced ourselves from the containment of the Avatar. We're moving around. We're traveling. We are now free within the holography to do all kinds of things. Some of you guys remember what you do when you sleep. I don't. And this has been a subject on my videos. I've even told people there's like 3 times in my entire life I've ever dreamed. I remember the dream. It's very vivid. It's very vivid to me. It's the same dream. I had it 2 times as a child and once as a teenager, and I just don't dream. And I do believe I dream every night, but for some reason when I wake up, I don't remember them. But I know a lot of good friends and family that do remember their dreams, and they tell me some crazy stuff sometimes. But I do believe that the true you the true, whoever Kelly is, whoever Campbell is, the true you is not your avatar. And when you're in deep REM sleep and you are completely separated from that avatar, I believe the true you is able to explore, learn, travel, share, exchange information with other souls that are also traveling. Some people call it the Akashic field. Some people call it astral projection. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I'm not a dream specialist. These are entirely theoretical. They just make sense to me.
So, and just your opinion, obviously, do you think the dream state's been hijacked? Because that's what it's, kind of, we've got all these stories of all these, people and beings coming into our dreams and nightmares and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I do get that, but let's not. You're familiar with the Matrix movie. That's what introduced to the modern psyche, all about the simulation. Okay, are you familiar with where they took Morpheus from? Do you know the origin of Morpheus? He's the main character. He's the black guy. He's the one that gives Neo the game. He's the one that tells him everything. But do you know where the name Morpheus came from?
I can't remember.
No.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Morpheus comes from a 2,000-year-old text that was explaining belief systems that were at the time in the Greek and Roman culture of an invisible messenger, like a god, a demigod named Morpheus. And he was the very god that personified the dream world. And in an epic poem by Ovid, it's an awesome poem. I've read 2 different translations to Ovid, and it's fantastic. The poem is called Metamorphosis, and it gives all kinds of deep details about the ancient world. It was written 2,000 years ago, and it's really easy to obtain a very cheap paperback or free PDFs on Google. But Ovid's Metamorphosis talks about Morpheus, the actual god of dreams, the personification of the god of dreams. He is the son of another demigod named Hypnos. You know where that word, comes from, right?
Yeah.
Well, Morpheus is the son of Hypnos, the god of sleep, where we get hypnosis from. And Morpheus had the power to enter into people's dreams, and only when they're in the dream state could Morpheus go in there and tell you direct messages from the gods, messages that if you were awake you would not be allowed to receive. But this is an old belief. This is an old belief system. It might be pre-Greek, it might be Achaean, Dorian, I don't know, but it was preserved in a 2,000-year-old poem by Ovid in his Metamorphosis.
And so he was looked on as good, basically giving wisdom.
Well, really, I'm gonna say he was neutral.
Okay.
I don't remember seeing any evidence that he played the polarity game like a lot. When it comes to the Greek pantheons, everybody who's fallen in love with the Olympians would like to believe they're all good gods, but when you listen to all the stories of the things they do, it was all very human, and some of them were wicked sons of bitches. Some of them were just no good, rotten to the core. So yeah, but Morpheus seems to be very, very neutral. He doesn't seem to play evil, doesn't seem to be concerned with good. He's a deliverer of anything that the gods want mortals to know, but they don't want other gods to know that they gave them that information. So it had to be secreted to them through dreams. Right. So the only reason I introduced this is because it adds an element from antiquity that there was a belief that the gods do confer information to men, but they don't do it while men are awake. They wait for them to fall asleep to confer whatever information. It's a very old belief. So I'm pretty sure it's older than Morpheus, but that's where they got Morpheus from in the Matrix.
Wow, that's cool, man. So definitely we've not had any evidence of a time where we just had light and no darkness. That darkness is as organic to this simulation as light.
Man, that's a good question. I don't think anybody has ever asked me that before. First of all, it would always take some kind of gradations of shadow in order to break up light. So if we're going to be talking about light as a as a sense, I mean, we only see 5.5% of the electromagnetic spectrum. So white light is even less than that. I can't imagine a universe of pure white light. There would have to be some gradations of other hues in order for it to bring definition, to bring things of interest. There's a really good book by Lyle Jacobs. He's a modern philosopher. He wrote a book called The Discovery of Nothing. And the entire book is his philosophical take on the architecture of our reality being binary. Everything is a series of zeros and ones. Everything physical in existence can be reduced to binary code. And he gives many, many examples in philosophy of how you translate the physical world into a philosophical construct. His name is Lyle Jacobs. It's a really deep book. But he made an interesting comment in that book, and it's always been with me. He said, people always find the less value in the empty spaces. He said, because you value the constructs, you value the architecture, you value the statue, you value all that. He says, but there's nothing to fill without a previous empty. It's the empty spaces around the things we value that give them the shape that we value. He saw the world from a different perspective. That's all I'm saying. And it's really interesting. So I'm answering that with your proposition about a time period of all white light. How much value would we find in that? I mean, it would be very sterile to me.
I guess sterile from the perspective of how we perceive light today, because we've only known it as contrasting to the non-light. So, but if we were in a state of all light, then there would be another contrasting element that potentially we don't know of, that would be related to actually creating that space within that light. I mean,
I can agree. Yeah, I definitely can agree with that idea.
Yeah. And the reason that we're on that tangent is because as we've been looking at sleep and dreams and the notion of darkness and sleep being organic to us, darkness being organic to us, like what actually is happening in that dream space, because no one ever talks about it. It's just that it happens every day and no one actually has any focus on it, which of course to us makes us always want to look at it more, because it's been whitewashed from our cultural interest as a focal point. So as we looked at dreams and that being then a connection to what are they, then we also looked at, was there a time when we didn't dream, when we didn't sleep, when light was all there was? And this whole shift in our vehicles have been have changed, have evolved inorganically to accommodate for darkness, for nighttime and sleep.
Right. You know what? I can't argue any of that. It sounds rational, and it kind of makes me wonder if, just like the avatar, just like your physical body needs to reboot back with physicality, it needs its rest, it needs nutrition, it needs to be able to power down so it can power back up when you're awake. Just like the body needs to reboot with the physical world around it, what if it's also the same for the spirit? And the spirit needs a break from the body. It needs a reboot. It needs a personal a reset as well. And it needs to get away. And the reason I say get away, I can't separate this phenomenon with the conclusions of people who've done very deep studies on dreaming. And they found 4 things that are very common with people who claim to dream the most. Now, there are 7 or 8 or 10 different things that there's a whole good list. You can find it on Google. I've read it. There's a list of 10 major things that people dream about, but they went deeper. They actually vetted the answers. They only wanted to know from the people who claimed that they dreamed the most. Almost every night they dreamed. So they vetted them, quarantined them, and they questioned exactly what are the nature of the dream. You know what? They found 4 common denominators that were across the board. All of them agreed on these 4 things. Do you know what they are?
No.
Go for it. I'm one of those people that dream every single night. So I'm going
to tell you, I bet you're going to sync with 2, 3, or all 4 of these right here. But this was the scientific output on this study. And they specifically said the majority of people who dream the most in this world dream about either being chased, being naked, flying, or falling. Those are the four common denominators among the people who claim to dream the most. And flying was on the top of the chart.
Interesting. Well, I don't dream of being naked, and I mean, some of being chased, some of flying. A lot of conversations I have in my dreams, a lot of dialoguing and relating with others, other entities. So interesting. How about you, Campbell? Do you dream every night?
I don't remember them every night, no.
I don't
My only
either at all.
recurring one was I was falling off a cliff, but I was running, then I hit the ground and keep running, so it was weird. It was
you did all of them in once. Were you
I
naked?
did all of them at once,
You did all of
Got
them
it
at
all.
once.
Tick, 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 tick.
Yeah, that's a good observation there.
So I mean, like it's interesting because as we started to look at dreams and sleep and the organic nature of it and what it actually looks like, then we started to look at, around the mythology, which I was talking to you before we started the show, and we started to look at where did the sort of what we could discover about the and particularly focusing on the Nordic, Scandinavian, Icelandic mythology. We were looking at elves, and that came about, Jace, really randomly. This Campbell chucked something at me about dark elves, and then I got another synchronistic about dark elves. Then we were looking at this Atlantis timeline, and then we actually followed this concept of elves and what are elves and where do they actually stand in our how historically evidenced are they actually, and is what's actually going on in our realm, is it actually a perpetual tug of war between the idea of this light elf realm and this idea of this dark elf realm, and the dark elf realm ended up morphing into the idea of them being dwarves. So when we came up with dwarves, we were both like, dwarves, fascinating, because we've got no cultural reference point. They've been deleted from our narrative. Really, all we ever see of dwarfs is Snow White and Seven Dwarfs and fucking Lord of the Rings, right? So what? Dwarfs, but and I say that because in comparison to the amount of content that's available when you actually start looking into dwarfs, it's huge. It's a huge body of historical work around dwarfs, which has morphed into the idea of elves. So tell me, what do you know historically through your obvious research when it comes to dwarfs? They're very connected to dreams.
I'm aware that there are architectural anomalies that have been found where only little people could have lived in these structures. Archaeologists have found them. They don't make they're not very popular. I know there are whole villages in China up to the 1800s where I'm talking about very, very tiny humans were living there. Also South America. But the dwarf concept is very interesting. It's Scandinavian, it's Norwegian, it's Nordic, it's very Nordic. There is a lady about 70, 80 years ago who put together an encyclopedia, and she had access to books going back 400 years. Her name is Catherine Briggs, and she wrote the Encyclopedia of Fairies, Bogies, Goblins, Hobgoblins, Sprites, Dwarfs, and the title of the book names like nine different fairies and fairykin beings. But Catherine Briggs' book is fantastic, and she goes into a lot of these details. There's traditions all about inducing sleep, making potions, dwarves singing songs, playing instruments, and children in villages falling asleep. Parents in ancient German towns were terrified of short, small people being seen in the forest. And often whole villages would come together with pitchforks and weapons, and they would search out, because anytime those little people were seen, local children disappeared. And there was many tales in Scandinavia of children waking up from their sleepwalking or whatever, going out to a field nearby and then seeing fairies dance in a cornfield or a wheat field or a barley field, and the fairies would invite them to come out and dance, and then they would, and the children would go out there and the children would fall asleep. Well, they would wake up in the ring. And then in the next morning, they'd run back for breakfast, they'll tell their mom and dad what happened. They'd be called liars. And this story played out many, many times. And people would go and investigate, and they found crop circles, right? Exactly where these children said that they were dancing and playing with fairies. So it's yes, the phenomenon of sleep is just like the alien abduction, the whole alien abduction deal, where these ETs are described just like the fairies were, the green elves were described 4, 5, 6, 700 years ago in medieval Europe. So it's I do see the connections 100%. Those connections are there. Just like you said, the dwarves. What was the origin of the word nightmare? Here in the West in the United States, someone started a rumor and it ended up being published, but it's false. That nightmare comes from the black horses of people's dreams, and that when horses were heard traveling at night, it brought terror to people and all that. That's not true. The origin of the word nightmare comes from mar, which is a Norwegian Scandinavian word for a wicked hag that people would wake up and find sitting on their chest, sucking their life force out and making them fall into a deep sleep. A little dwarven woman, a hag that would just sit there and stare at them. The origin of the term sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
But you're right. Dwarves they're everywhere. They're everywhere in the stories.
Well, it's interesting because dwarfs is that we have like known through our culture is this like short, stumpy, red hair, angry little dudes. But actually through the mythology, they're actually tall. They have white alabaster skin. They have larger than average blue eyes. They have long white hair. They essentially look like how we would akin Gandalf or, the white elves would look like, or that's how the dwarves were actually described. And interestingly, they couldn't, if they were exposed to the sun, they would turn to stone in these legends alongside the trolls and alongside giants potentially, and that there was an ongoing war between perpetual conflict, which could be the dynamic polarity, putting it out there, the dynamic polarity that we exist in between these benevolent beings, these like lighter white elves genre, which is akin to nature and akin to beauty and architecture and aesthetics, like Tartaria, that whole consciousness. And then we've got the dark elves, or the dwarfs which are akin to vampires turning to stone, this whole Medusa technology. And then that questions like, what is the sun? Like, if that was a truth, then what is the sun that exposure to the sun could actually turn an entity into stone? And like, I don't know if we've evidenced this through history in your work, as in that actually being a truth, but obviously we've come across lots of images of, animals and giants and beings that have been turned to stone as we've been going through the Tartarian work. So they're really interesting parallels. And then I'm like, is the simulation held up via dwarf elven magic? Like, did they walk amongst us, Jason? Were they akin to human beings on this realm? Like, has that been completely deleted? Like, is Tartaria just like the step one of understanding what really went on,
Campbell.
Yes.
I'm about to blow Kelly's mind. You ready for this?
Go. I'm ready for this.
You ready for this? Listen. Gnomes, dwarves, elves, trolls, hobgoblins, bogies, whatever you call them doesn't matter. Those are cultural attachments to the same phenomenon. Okay. We have to go back. I'm answering all of your questions in one scenario. I'm answering your question about all the different names, all the different physical descriptions. I'm answering your question about the sun and how it's involved, all that, because it goes all the way back to the vapor canopy world. You have to understand, Europeans aren't stupid people. They never were. Their frames of reference were more primitive because they didn't have the technologically advanced society we have today. Not when these stories were developing. Now, my personal opinion is, and I believe Campbell believes that too, we've been technologically advanced in the past. But during this long hiatus in the last 2,000 years, we have not. We've only had like steampunk versions of technology pop up in different societies, but it's never been a worldwide phenomenon like it is today. So what we have here is during the vapor canopy period, there was civilizations in the underworld that freely came to the surface because they were living in a we were living in a biosphere with humans. Remember the old you've got to take this into consideration with the old cosmological models. The old cosmologies were all the same all the way around the world. There was a sky that was an impenetrable barrier. That was their belief. It was a sky that was an impenetrable barrier, and the gods lived there. Then there was the earth where humans dwelt, called Midgard. Then there was Nephilim, which was the underworld underneath them, and it was equally populated with all kinds of races, and they could equally come up to the surface and not suffer anything. And that's because back then there was no sun to fear. Then you have to remember the physical descriptions of all the elves and gnomes and trolls and all. Listen, the physical descriptions are of races that live in darkness. The eyes are huge. They can see excellent at nighttime in the dark. They're used to living in the underworld. Now, at nighttime in medieval Europe, they come to the surface. They come to the surface and they're seen. Now, when they're seen, children aren't scared of anything. They befriend anything. And a lot of the origin of a lot of these little fairy stories. I am on board with the existence of subterrestrial races. And I'm also on board with the fact that it's been the modern paradigm that our scientific community is actually lying to us about the origin of the subterrestrial races, and always trying to get us to believe they're coming from space when they've been underneath us from the beginning. And the stories of elves and trolls and vanishing and melting when the sun hits them they didn't make that up. When the vapor canopy collapsed, it was realized real quick that these beings couldn't come up no more, but for small, brief periods of time in the darkness of night. As soon as that sun started coming up, they could not let that radiation touch their skin. Or they would atrophy because they're not used to it. This is like the origin of the real super white Caucasians as well. They were after a cataclysm, they had hid in underground cities. This isn't Jason making this up. We have traditions from Turkey of a king named Abenaki. Abenaki actually took his whole entire population. These are Turkish legends. Phrygian legends, but Phrygia was the kingdom that took over that same geographical area after the Hittites fell. But it's Turkey. And Abenaki took his entire population underground to protect them from something that was going to happen to the sky. I cite these in my videos, but we have to connect that to the greatest archaeological discoveries ever that are being hidden from most of the world. You can Google them, you can see the pictures yourself, but everybody should be talking about this, but they're not. 59 underground cities have so far been excavated in Turkey. This isn't fiction, and anybody can verify it. So we have populations of people living for a long time in the underworld. But when they come back up, they find a world that's now has a burning disk for 50% of the time over the sky. And it takes them a long time. A lot of them can't deal with it. So what do? They do exactly what we find in the traditions of the world. The underground races, whatever you want to call them, the sons of God, you want to call them the sons of the earth-born race. They came up and they took the daughters of men, the daughters of Adamu, the people in Midgard, and they took for themselves wives and daughters. And this is where we have the stories in the Dead Sea Scrolls and in the book of Enoch, in the book of Jasher. All of a sudden we have hybridization. All of a sudden humans on the surface are tripping because the babies being born to human females now have white skin, alabaster skin, gemstone eyes, and they've never seen this before. because the people in Midgard up until that time were olive skinned, black eyed, black haired, long, straight black haired, and they're just like the people of the Urumbaba civilization in South America, which were genetically similar to the people of the Yangtze Valley in China, which were genetically similar to the people of the Melampides of the Nile Valley in Egypt, which were perfectly identifiable with the Mohenjo-Daro, Larak, and Harappan civilization in this valley region, which were perfectly describable as the black-headed people of Sumer and Akkad at the deltas for the Tigris and Euphrates. All the great river valley civilizations were the exact same race. This is why they had the same reed boats. They had the same type of languages, all starting in pictographs. They had the same belief systems, same cosmologies, and then all of a sudden, somebody who wasn't them popped up in the world, and we're told that they emerged from mountains and they built their Edens, and these Edens were walled enclosures that protected them from the outside world, and they would not let ordinary humans in there. They wouldn't let them, but ordinary humans knew that there were pleasure palaces. They knew that there were gardens. They knew that every good thing was found inside these walled enclosures. They weren't allowed in, though. But what happened was they started coming out of those and taking the daughters of men, and they started giving birth to all these other races that appeared in the world. This is the story from all around the world. It's not just a story from the Book of Enoch or the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Genesis text. It's the story told all around the world. So we have underground species, and there's probably a war on underground, and it's probably more than one species. So I don't know. Some people are really big on the reptilians. They believe reptilians live in underground. I really don't know. I've only found 2 references in all my studies. I've only found 2 references that could possibly be interpreted as reptilian beings living in the underworld. I've only found 2. So that's not enough for me to really tell you that there's a reptilian race down there. But I can tell you it's been a belief forever that there's a race down there, and this is the origin of our gnomes and hobgoblins and trolls and elves. This is who they are. This is why they had the translucent white skin. This is why they had the huge eyes. This is why they had all these features that were solar sensitive. It's there was community, there was communing. We knew more about the Nephilim. We knew more about the inhabitants of the underworld when the underworld could freely concourse with us under the vapor canopy. When that vapor canopy collapsed, that totally separated. You got to understand what's happening. Heaven, the vapor canopy, collapsed on Midgard, the world, and completely isolated Niflheim or Hell, Sheol, whatever you want to call it. It's in different cosmologies. It's called different names, but it's all the same. It's the 3-part separation of the creation. And when heaven fell, when the sky collapsed, the middle earth was cut off from both. Cut off from heaven and cut off from the underworld. So that's my take. That's my interpretation based off all the evidence. But that's it.
So basically,
that was excellent, by the way.
Dwarves are.
I love that.
We're
Sorry, go on, Campbell. Yeah.
We're dwarf hybrids then, basically, like.
Yeah, well, we're hybrids. I believe that. I believe we're hybrids. There's no doubt in my mind. It's all. Yeah. Look, spiritually, I believe we're all the same. 100% spiritually, but genetically, there are differences in humans. Look, it's not just skin deep, bone structure, size of the skulls, cranial capacity. Yeah, the length of femurs and limbs. And look, there are huge differences in human anatomy. I mean, some people with high melatonin actually have skin 3 times thicker than people of European descent. As if it's almost as if they were genetically designed to survive extreme temperatures that other people cannot. Yeah, I mean look at that. Look at the almond-shaped eyes of Asiatics. They got an epicanthic fold that even anthropologists say, even biologists say it's not natural, it's cosmetic. So it almost defies the entire evolutionary model to have that epicanthic fold that gives the Oriental that almond-shaped eye. It's totally genetically cosmetic, and no one knows where it came from. because it would have never naturally occurred. And man, I've read books on genetic modifications in humans in ancient times that do not make sense. Human skeletons that have been found with extra ribs on each side, extra digits, 6 fingers on each hand, 6 fingers on each feet, and it wasn't something an anomaly. It was like in Nevada where they found an entire village full of skeletons that all had. It was their genetic trademark. It wasn't an anomaly, and it wasn't something. It was the norm. Every skeleton they found had six fingers and 6 toes, and they were expert basket weavers. And it's almost comical. Of course they would be. They got an extra digit. They can make all kinds of things. So yeah, our world is not what you think. You guys know that's my mantra. It's one of my mantras. Yeah. Our world is not what we think. The evidence is everywhere that we have an underworld, and that underworld is occupied, and there is an active disinformation force out there trying to get everybody to believe that all anomalous phenomena are from aliens in space.
Yeah,
it's not.
Yeah.
So sorry to summarize that, Jay. So I've got my head around it clearly. Like the sky. So there was 3 tiers basically. The heavens, yes. Middle Earth, hell, the hell realm. So, and so the sky collapsed, and that separated the realm we're in from the other 2. So there is an underground, there's an underrealm realm, and there's an above realm. And
yes, well, the separation. So you'll understand the separation perfectly. Okay, today, every day you wake up, you have daylight and you have nighttime.
Yeah.
But under the vapor canopy biosphere, it wasn't like that. Under the vapor canopy biosphere, when the sun was up, it was absolutely unseen. The sky was a dark purple light, high humidity, thick atmospheric pressure, ambient radiation. It was a totally different biosphere, and it just lit the world up. Like the Native Americans say, it was the time of the dark purple light. So, but at nighttime, it was pitch black space, but brilliant stars because of the condensation. Just like Genesis says, every evening and every morning, the moisture in the sky came down to the ground as a thick dew. Same thing the Native Americans said during the dark purple light, that the only way they could ever see the sun were the tiny pieces of sunlight trapped in the dew. The dew came down every night, and it animals grew to astonishing sizes. People grew to astonishing sizes. Plants, flora and fauna all grew to astonishing sizes during this period, about 2,000 years. Then the vapor canopy collapsed. But the stars were magnified because this vapor canopy that sent this condensation down, this moisture, there was still enough moisture in the mesosphere to turn that layer of the atmosphere into a magnifying glass. And that's why star patterns there's different star patterns that the Aboriginals and Native Americans and ancient Dravidians have recorded that you can't see they're not first magnitude, second, and third magnitude stars. You can't see these stars with the naked eye, and yet they're still recorded in old ancestral traditions. Even the Greeks have star maps for which we can't see those stars. So how did they? But we now know with the mesosphere intact, every night the stars were magnified. This is why the moon was venerated and the goddess religions were powerful back then. The moon filled the sky. On the other side of this giant nightly magnifying glass, the moon was right there filling up the sky. But the moonlight was not reflected sunlight. That's a misconception. The moonlight is giving its own dark light. It's a different temperature. It's a different gradient. Moonlight is not reflected sunlight. That's why I believe 100% the moon is a hologram. It is emitting light, but in phases to make it look like to you it's reflecting sunlight, but it's not. This is why in the vapor canopy, other species underworld could come up with and do all the things they do and interact. And this is why the legends and traditions of the ancient world are so weird, that not everybody who was intelligent was human. So this was the world, the biosphere. But when that vapor canopy collapsed, that ended that entire world. That's the day the sky fell. And when the sky fell, the great flood occurred and killed off a large population of the race of people. And from that day forward, the people in the underworld could only come up for small periods of time and in the darkest of night.
Well, that's interesting because most of the mythology we actually came across and looked at, they were from the Nordic, Icelandic, and they're in 6 months of darkness, 6 months of light, and they've got the whole northern light. They've got such a different atmosphere around them on that level.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, that period of time, like we started this video with like Spider Grandmother and putting the web in the sky in the dark period to pure light. Listen, I forgot to mention this, but in those same North Native American traditions about Spider Grandmother among the Abenaki or wherever they're called, Ibenaki or whatever, similar to the guy in Turkey, the king in Turkey, but around New England and the United States, southern Quebec area, those Native Americans there, they added more to the traditions that I hadn't seen in the other Native American traditions. Like I said, I've read many, many books on Native, like from the explorers in the 1700s and 1800s that were questioning all these old tribal elders. The books that they published back then are phenomenal. You don't read a lot of these stories in modern books, but one of the things that really stood out to me was that when the Great Spirit built the world on top of a turtle, and the ancients called it Turtle Island, it only had people, mountains, trees, plants, and all that. So the Great Spirit rested, and when the Great Spirit rested, it fell asleep. And it dreamed all these things. And in its dream, it created all the animal species. When the Great Spirit woke up, it saw Turtle Island was now filled with all kinds of animals, and mankind was happy. And I don't know where they got that, but that's a part of their traditions. They added to that. But there's just so many. The Native American traditions are rich. They are so rich in detail about that period of time. I just think I love it. I love the original. I like it because it's uncontaminated. Here are people that have been living a Neolithic lifestyle for thousands of years. So they have passed from mouth to mouth. They have passed these traditions religiously. It's not like a lot of the things we find in ancient texts that have passed through many scribes, many sources, many interpretations, have been redacted, lacunas have been filled, interpolations have been inserted when a different language is being used. It's not like that with these Native American traditions. They remember things as they were. That's what I like.
That's why we're told they're all just myths and legends, right? We're not supposed to listen to
that
kind of stuff.
Most of the giant traditions don't come from Europe. Europe has giants, yeah. Loki had giants, fought giants, and yes, giants are mentioned in the United Kingdom folk tales and all that. But you want to hear some stories about giants? Read any traditions about ancient American Native American traditions. All their stuff. They got White Rabbit and Glooskap and Bokika. They all fought giants. They were all giant killers. Giants are just as popular in Native American traditions as all the supernatural animals like White Rabbit and all that. But that's crazy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they believe in giants a lot, and that's relative to what we're talking about, because who told those stories? See, one thing that I've examined, and I have like 5 videos on giants. In one of my videos, I try to show a different perspective. All of us, we're in the same basic genetic family, all 3 of us. And what I mean is there isn't a little people, there isn't a dwarf, there isn't a giant among us 3. We are considered by our contemporaries average males and female as far as body types. All right, that's who the 3 of us.
Yeah.
But what about if we were to change the perspective of some of these legends that we're talking about giants? What if those traditions were only handed down to later people who are our size, but the original traditions came when there was only a short race of people here, when people our size showed up on their shores? Do you follow me?
Yeah.
Because I have found this same phenomenon with the stories of the Tuatha Danann, the Furbolgs, the Fomori, the Carians. I have found this flip, as if it's almost as if a very short stature people we can call them Iberians. In the north, they call them Skraelings, but every anthropologist will tell you they were in Europe and in America long before Caucasians ever showed up. So these Iberians were very, very small people, very short stature, but they weren't dumb. They weren't stupid. Then all of a sudden, 6'5", horned helm wearing, dragon ship driving Caucasians show up on their shores. And yeah, they're giants. They got copper and bronze weaponry. They've got iron spearheads. They've got wooden dragons that float on the top of the sea and got 100 arms. They're oars, but they don't know this. They've never seen. These dragons have wings. They don't know what sails are. And they got 40 ships land. And they can't even fight these giants. So the giants come in, but 300 years later, the offspring of these men that landed from a cataclysm, they couldn't go back home. They didn't bring any of their own wives and daughters and children because they had all died in their homeland. These were the men that were at sea. These were the men that were doing something else. They were pirating. They were on a mission. And by the time they come back, they find their whole homeland has been destroyed in a cataclysm. So they're looking for somewhere to start over. This is the history of the Anuna that later became known as the Anunnaki. They arrived by fleets of ship among a very short-statured people. They arrived looking like giants, technologically advanced. They landed, next thing you know, 200 and 300 years later, their offspring are still telling the story, but their offspring are almost as tall as they are. 500 years later, everybody from the original story's been long dead. Now, a very tall people, 6 foot tall people, are now populating all of this area, and they're telling the same traditions and stories, but they themselves are no longer 3'7". They're no longer 4'2". Now they're 6 foot and 6'2", telling the story of giants. So we have this great, huge story about gigantic invaders and all, but the original stature of the people has been lost, but not the details of the narrative. And this is what I have found a lot in my researches. It explains why we don't find those gigantic human skeletons. I'm not saying giants didn't exist, because I am aware that 9.5 foot tall to 11.5 foot tall human skeletons have been found because the Smithsonian Institute's been sued for destroying them. So, and I've seen the pictures in the old 1860s, 70s, and 80s archaeological monographs, the illustrations. I've seen the reports of the Royal Asiatic Society, human fossils that have actually been blasted out of sandstone when they're building cannon batteries and all that. All these things were recorded in the 17 and 1800s, but we don't have the specimens because collectors buy them up, or the Smithsonian buys them up, puts them on a ship, sends the ship out to the Atlantic, and sinks it. They got caught doing that. So it's anyway. We went on a tangent about giants only because giants are relative to the story of dwarves.
Yeah. And that's interesting because the Aboriginals, they have the pygmies here in Australia. Like the pygmies were a big part. They were like 3 foot high. And that's pretty well known to everyone here. I think your family even had some connection, Campbell, to pygmies. Is that right?
Yeah, well, my mum lived in like Queensland when she was young, and yeah, they were around. Like everyone sort of knew of them, and now that they seem to have just I don't know when, don't know how, but they've just disappeared. Somewhere between.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, somewhere between when my mum was a kid and when I was a kid, gone. None of them left.
That is weird. That is weird. Like how can we not even keep up with a whole community of small people? That's crazy. It's that is crazy.
Yeah, so I've done a bit of research and I can't find anything on them anymore. There's pictures from the 60s, 1960s and stuff.
Well, did you know that the tallest people in the world they're in Africa, and they're called the Watusi tribe?
Yeah.
The tallest people in the world are the African Watusi, and they live in the same area and have constant dealings with the shortest people in the world.
From the Congo.
The sub-Saharan African, the Bantu pygmies. That's all. I read that. I think I read that in like Guinness Book of World's Records. The tallest and the shortest people live in the same forest. But Yeah, it's
I mean,
crazy.
you can so with that shifting concept, Jace, like you can see like the artwork, a lot of the artwork we look at, you know, it's this giants with these little people. Like that so easily could have been the 3 foot versus the 6 foot, you know,
Mm.
from the perspective of the 3 foot artist, like that would definitely account. But it doesn't account for like the, you know, the 15-foot doorways that we have in some of these buildings. You know, there's massive fucking buildings with massive
Right.
doorways and windows. Yeah.
Well, okay. I don't want to be an iconoclast on something that I absolutely believe in. And what I mean is, iconoclast is an idol smasher. If people believe in giants, I don't want to be the guy that's trying to tell you they didn't exist. I don't want to be the guy that's trying to tell you they didn't exist, especially when I put out a video about the giant cities of Bashan. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else on YouTube's ever done that, but I read an old book from the 1800s, and I show the pages in that video that there is a series of archaeological discoveries in the 1800s, 1860s, and 70s. Why this guy went through northern Syria and he used the Bible narrative that talked about the cities of Bashan were occupied by the Rephaim giants. So he went to that area of northern Syria, high up in these inaccessible mountains, and couldn't believe that they're perfectly preserved. Those giant cities they're massive. He says a race of people to live here. Every bed, all the buildings and structures, you can see how they lived. But he said the engineering on the doors is unlike anything he's ever seen, because the jamb, the lintel, and the whole massive door itself was all one piece, but it was three separate stones. And he doesn't know how they fit stones inside of other stones. They could have never been carved that way. And there's no way to remove them. He said, yeah, it was done with a science that it's inexplicable today, unless you can shape stone. Like, so anyway, his book is all about this. He's just marveling over the fact that they're preserved in Syria today, and on the ancient maps, it's called the giant cities of Bashan, and they're still there. They're still there, high in those Lebanese mountains, and anybody can go see them today. A lot of them have been taken over. They're inhabited by modern people, but you can still see that they were built for giants. They were built for humans that were on average 9 to 10 foot tall. But yeah, it's crazy.
Mm.
Well, I,
Well,
mean, I
yeah, you know
love
what? I totally forgot about that video. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to repost that video.
excellent.
Yeah.
Definitely put a link down here. I think it'd
Mm.
be good. Look, I mean, I love this. I love looking at it from 3 foot and 6 foot. I can so project that across so much of what Cambell and I've looked at in the last 2 years. I mean, it's a really good like shift in perspective. I love that. So like here we are like having these conversations. Obviously, there's many people around the world where their consciousness is now shifting towards being able to dialect about and have this sort of narrative. Would that represent to you that these three realms that have been like quarantined or isolated from each other are starting to like blend, come together, flow together again? Like, are we becoming consciously wiring and firing with that sort of those realms again?
Okay, let me answer that from an eschatological perspective. And what I mean is what prophetic material, whether it's true or not, but what ancient prophecies refer to the end times as. Okay. One of those identifiers you already know, as in the days of Noah. That's a real popular one in like New Testament doctrine, that what the conditions of the last days will be the same conditions of the first time, like the Egyptian Zeptepi, which means the first time. And this was when the sky was a hammered metal type deal. There's a lot of traditions about the sky being solid in ancient times. Now, as in the days of Noah is one, and the common denominators of that period was that there was a vapor canopy intact, and there was concourse between an underworld species and a surface dwelling species, humans. In those days, there was hybridization. There was an active program going on to create a subspecies, a third. Call it whatever you want to. Some people believe that subspecies are Caucasians. Some people believe that it might be a different race in this world. I'm not even going to speculate. I'm just saying that the introduction of all these ancient traditions are 100% from a non-Caucasian perspective. I have an entire playlist called the Anuna Files, where I itemize all these old traditions, Thor Heyerdahl, all these different people, Harold T. Wilkins, who cite all these traditions and myths and legends, and they're all from non-Caucasian peoples, but they all say the same thing. They all say the same thing. They were on this world before white people were. They were structured in totem societies, in goddess worshiping societies. They revered the moon. They drew their powers from the stars. The sky was a dark purple or dark blue light. It was a very different world. The animals were easily controlled, like a female power, but the animals were also gigantic, but they were easily domesticated. They weren't like when the dark purple light collapsed. Now all of a sudden the animals were the enemies of mankind. The animals become unruly. So we have to take all these things in consideration. This is why I'm always pushing the Phoenix chronology of people, because that's what we have. May 2040, we have the return of the vapor canopy. The Phoenix will bring it back. And if that's true, then now we understand what these other prophecies are about. Because a lot of these things in Revelation and in Second Esdras, in the book of Matthew and Luke, these prophecies about the conditions that humans are going to suffer in the future, they could never happen right now. But they can happen once the sun is removed from the equation. So yeah, I don't want to go deep in that. I've already got people already tired of hearing all that. But what I'm saying is, I'm talking about on my channel. Yeah, I get carried away. I'm always talking about the Phoenix chronology and all that. But I'm just trying to answer your question the best way I can, and it's that all this is returning. It already began. There's already concourse between an underground species and the elite today. We already know this. There's way too many researchers who have died, been murdered, come up missing, who keep coming up with very significant data that there is something going on between the rulers of our world, who are human, and some type of agreements they have with what they're putting out as misinformation is an extraterrestrial species. It's not extraterrestrial, though. It's subterrestrial. That's what they're really trying to hide, is that all activity, all movement between the elite and this other race is in the underworld. That's what my channel's about. Archaix, that's what I go into detail in so many videos that you gotta quit looking up. Everything in the sky is there to deceive you. All activity in this realm is underground.
Yeah.
I've even theorized that the mechanics of the Phoenix phenomenon itself is controlled from the underground. That's how convinced I am that everything's happening in the underworld. Yeah.
Nice.
So it does tap into your dwarves and elves and all that. So yeah, but imagine this. Vapor canopy returns. All these prophecies, now all these prophecies start coming true. It's hard for people to die, just like Revelation says. Very hard for people to die, because now they're healing rapidly. Vapor canopy's back. Atmospheric pressures change. It activates latent genes within us that allow for rapid cellular regeneration. Man, we can breathe we can hold our breath for long periods of time. We have antitoxins built into our genetic structure. It's almost impossible to die. And now, just like some of the prophecies are talking about, it's going to be much worse for you if you kill somebody in that time period. Think about it. How much work and effort are you going to have to go in to murder somebody under those conditions? Because there's no more claim of accident. There's no more claim of, damn, I didn't mean to hit him that hard. Or damn, I didn't mean to do. No. Yeah, you'd have to beat him 400 times with a shovel, because in between hitting him, his knots are going back down. He's already regenerating and healing. So during this vapor canopy period, we have other prophecies in the book of Revelation that now make sense. The invasion isn't coming from the sky. That's going to be the lie in the future. In the book of Revelation, it says the invasion comes from the bottomless pit. That's somewhere underground. That's in the book of Revelation, and anybody can read it. The book of Revelation talks about one of the 7 kings that returns. Remember, as in the days of Noah. One of the 7 kings were ruling in the vapor canopy period. When the 8th king took the throne, the flood happened. Vapor canopy collapsed. He never enjoyed his reign. But in the book of Revelation, there's a riddle. It says there were 7 kings and then an 8th until the 7th secured his throne. I mean, it's a huge riddle. I can't cite it verbatim, but there's a huge riddle in there, and it mentions the existence of an 8th king and that he's coming back, and then it names him. He's Abaddon the Destroyer. Abaddon the Destroyer has the key to the bottomless pit, the underworld. And why can he now open the underworld for a whole invasion of the underworld to come to the surface in the middle of the apocalypse? He can do it because his soldiers are no longer fearing sunlight. The vapor canopy is back. The fact that the vapor canopy is back after May 2040 is also evident in the 7 trumpets of Revelation, which says that God will reduce the day, the night, the sun, the moon, and the stars by a third. Every bit of that's in there. Every bit of it's in there. So all the clues that as in the days of Noah are right there in the book of Revelation and in the book of 2nd Esdras. Because in the book of 2nd Esdras, there's a lot more details that are harrowing. I'm not going to say in here. People can read that for themselves about what's going to happen to the human body and some humans, some births, stuff like that, babies, stuff like that. It's too sensitive for this right here. This is supposed to be good times with Autodidactic and Kelly. yeah. We're not trying to create nightmares right now.
Fucking awesome. Amazing. Yeah, right. So Cambell, like we go through this process of really researching.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense. Like this is just like cross references everything that we've got to so far, that this is this and what is going on down here is where everything is happening. And I totally agree. Like it's such a fascinating Cambell, we've got so much work to do on this topic.
Hey, check this out. I'm gonna here's something that was interesting that there's a Japanese belief. There's a Japanese belief that I thought this was really crazy. Somebody should do a meme or something about it. But there's a Japanese belief that if you can't sleep at night, it's because you're already in somebody else's dream. Whoa. And I thought that was cool as hell. I thought that was cool as hell when I heard that. But the Japanese, I don't know if it's a modern belief by the Japanese, but at one time it was one of their core beliefs. I think now it's just something traditional. Wow. But yeah, among the Japanese, if you find yourself restless at night and you can't sleep, it's because you're already in somebody else's dream.
I love that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's cool. I mean, like if we look at it with our Indigenous, I haven't actually come across many Dreamtime stories about the underground, Cambell. Have you? From our Indigenous here in Australia?
Really? No, we might have to ask a question. Yeah.
It's very geared to the sky, but not so much to the underground. I mean, I haven't really asked many of our elders, but I definitely would like to find out more information about that.
Okay, let's let me ask you, are you guys like in Texas? We have Carlsbad caverns. We got all kinds of cavern systems. Texas is sitting on hundreds of thousands of miles of limestone caves and caverns. Now, we know we have our aquifer underneath Texas is an ocean. You know what I mean? So underneath we got aquifer, but it's all fresh water. And I don't know. I'm really intrigued. Are there any caves and cavern systems that have ever been found in Australia? Do y'all have any? Are there any national parks you can go to that allow you to explore caves and caverns? We've got them in the United States.
There are, but they're
not
really
like yours.
Yeah, they're normally just sort of individual caves or a little bit, but no big system. We've heard about, big tunnel systems and stuff going, around, but as far as natural caves, not really.
Huh.
I mean, not that they tell us.
Having said that, where my old farm was in an area called around this place called Inverell, and there was a thing called the Limestone Caves, and it's one of the only unexplored cave systems in Australia, and it's got a very humble opening, and basically you only can go in maybe 100 meters before it just looks treacherous, but it is known to be one of the largest underground cave systems unexplored in Australia. And though we have different caves in different national parks, like the idea of catacombs, the idea of extensive cave systems, it is definitely not highlighted or put on any tourist attraction information here in Australia. No.
Oh, that's interesting. You guys remember one of the movies that terrified me when I was a kid was Dennis Quaid. He went into the dreams of a child to help that child fight a monster that was like a snake man that chased him in his dreams. Awesome movie. Dreamscape. Awesome movie called Dreamscape with Dennis Quaid. It's like 1982, 83, or 84. But it's y'all never saw that movie?
Don't think so.
Yeah, this scientific experimentation found out that this guy had a knack for being hypnotized. He was very easily susceptible, and the scientists took him in there, told him, "Hey man, I've developed some technology that you can cerebrally interface with somebody who's already asleep. If you're a willing participant, if you're not a willing participant, the resistance alone will keep you from being able to do it. But if you're willing to go in his dream, once he's in REM, I can send you in there." And that's what he did. And man, he wished he didn't.
That's very dwarf-like. Yeah.
That snake man tore his ass up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. It was like other movies in the 80s. I know you guys are familiar with Freddy Krueger. I know you are.
Yeah.
Well, that was my first night. Gremlins and Nightmare on Elm Street. My first two nightmares as a child.
Oh, Grim! How old are you, Kelly?
I'm 44.
Okay, you're not saying you're a lot younger than I am. But yeah, Gremlins was great, but it was a comedy. It was a comedy.
Freaked me out, man. Add the water.
Yeah. Freddy Krueger was kind of it had comic moments, but it was horror.
It was really scary.
It scared the hell out of me. I didn't even like the concept that, because Freddy Krueger, while you were awake, he could not hurt you.
Yeah.
He was undefeatable. He's an immortal. You can't mess with him. But as long as you're awake, you're immortal. Yeah. But man, if you fell asleep, he can get you. Yeah, Freddy Krueger was something else.
I had nightmares and I watched it with the volume down. I didn't even have the volume up. It so fucking terrified me. Yeah, that was scary, that one. That was actually the 80s are full of scary movies like that. The 80s really,
they were.
Yeah, they were mind-bending ones.
Stuff, yeah.
Way more than now. Like the 80s had a thing going on with Poltergeist. There were so many of them. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of these movies, they have a theme, just like Matrix has a theme. This theme is that, in the truther community a lot, we like to refer to the collective as those who are still asleep. Hey man, you're still sleeping. If you haven't woke up by now, you're probably never going to wake up. It's just you're a member of the collective and nobody can get to you, man. So you're asleep. This is a common description that we give to people who just don't get it, that have basically bought into all the false narratives. So you're asleep. We get that. But isn't it interesting that we call them asleep even though we're awake? And it's crazy that all these ancient traditions and all these movies infer that the greatest truths can be delivered to us while we're sleeping, because when we're awake, we're blind. Just like the whole idea of the ancient Morpheus. Yeah, the ancient Greeks were absolutely normal, but if they got visited by Morpheus couldn't tell them anything of value while they were awake. But when they were asleep, they received divine information from Morpheus. It's just weird. The whole flip on it's the whole flip on asleep and awake. It's just crazy.
Yeah, well,
It's
that's
a good
what started
topic.
us even
You
asking.
guys chose a
Yeah.
good topic.
That's
You
what
guys
started
chose a
us
good
looking at
topic.
dreams, yeah, and sleep. Like it's such a big part of our reality. It seems to be like flip. It's an inversion. Like let's look at what's going on there. Yeah. So
Definitely.
like, do you have any more questions, Campbell?
No, I think I'm good. I'm sitting here thinking about everything you said now. That's the problem when you talk to Jason, you come out with more questions than you went in with.
Yeah, it's true.
Which is
Like, I
always a
mean,
good
a
thing.
mind-blowing conversation. Loved it. There's so many tangents we can go off, Campbell, on this one. I'm really excited. I especially want to have a look at the Indigenous here in Australia and what their stories are in relation to this topic. And because the dream time in Australia is massive, Jay.
Nobody ever wants to talk about other things. You know what I mean?
Oh man, like the Tartaria concept, consciousness, it feels so limiting comparatively to, but it's just been a pathway, an amazing pathway into us just like going down all these
Well, that's what I'm
other
saying.
ideas and
We could
questions.
actually start something. It's listen, I'm telling you now, I have no intentions of slowing down, guys. I'm moving forward and fast and far. And I don't care how much opposition I come across. I've come up with a little bit, but it's inconsequential. It's not affecting me at all. So if anything, it's boosting my morale, boosting my support base and all that. But it's time to start navigating into other avenues. There's many topics. I was surprised when Campbell sent me the email, said, "Hey man, you want to talk about dreams and all that?" Me and Kelly are on some dream stuff. I said, "Okay, well, let's do that." But kind of surprised me. The next video we do shouldn't be so long. We should do one, next few weeks, 3-4 weeks or so. But pick another topic, something that because the more diversity that we introduce and yet still tie into the topics that we are familiar with, it's going to bring better clarity for people. People will more readily be able to wrap their minds around resets and around edited history and missing history when we address all these other things that don't seem so anomalous, but they do tie into it. They do tie into
And it's so cool
everything.
talking to you, Jace, because I guess I like you've kind of risen to be like the master historian of the community, like it's fucking rad. Like we can actually come up with any sort of tangent that we're on and actually have it cross-referenced with like a walking encyclopedic historical brain that's like entered the community so powerfully.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean you're offering an amazing service, honestly, to so many of us who are just like have so many questions, and it's so nice to be able to talk about such, I'm like Tartaria is sort of like over here now. Like, there's just a million things that like need to be discussed, and within doing that, gosh, new tangents create new understandings and new thoughts for people like that.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. That's all. I'm down with it. Y'all come up with another topic.
Awesome.
All right, awesome. We've been challenged, Campbell. Excellent. Leave
We've been challenged.
All righty. And thank you for your time again. And yeah, we'll definitely get another good topic up, and we'll be in touch and get you back on, and we'll continue this quest, right? Going sort of sideways on and trying to tie everything back into what this reality is.
All right. Well, Jace, thank you so much for joining us once again. Brilliant conversation. Learned heaps, got heaps of new questions. I love that. Hopefully the audience has like gone through the same journey, of course. And yeah, I mean, Merry Christmas, man. Like it's almost at the end of the year and time for some.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think some time for some rest for everyone. Yeah, like you just chill out in their homes for a bit. I think it'd be good for everyone. So many energies going on, so much energy using, and even like starting to debunk and unprogram our minds. It's like people need to rest. I mean, here we are talking about sleep.
Well, I bought my Christmas present. It's right here, a brand new mic from my studio. Right
awesome.
Here. And with that, I'm gonna sign out. I love you guys.
Love you too, Jason. Thank you so much, man.
We'll talk to you soon.
You have a great one, buddy.
See you, mate.
See you, mate.